Hello, I'm Laura Furiosi, divorced mother of 3, and I'm here with my mother, Lynette Galvin, with 35 years' experience in family law. You're listening to the Divorce Course podcast. Through our candid discussions, we hope to help you through your divorce or de facto separation. We will be answering the most commonly asked questions and covering the stages and steps that you will face on your way to freedom. Today, the Queensland Government has followed other states in agreeing to bring in and making coercive control illegal in Queensland. And we're very excited about that, Mum. And there's a lot of celebration because a lot of hard work has gone into this. So today we're going to be touching on how the laws changing may affect your current case and how the laws changing may affect your way forward through the domestic violence family courts of Australia. Mum, thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
And it's a good day to have these laws and the changes from the inquiry they're taking. The Queensland Government is taking on all the recommendations, which is really great news.
It is.
Yes. And I think there's a lot of advocates out there like Hannah's mother and father who are working hard to get this through, as well as Alison Baden Clay's family in Queensland as well. So I think thanks to all the efforts of those families and everybody who listens, who makes some noise about this, I think we can all make some change. And Mum, I think it's very exciting. And I was wondering if we could talk about what the current law is now and the current situation and then what the laws might be in the future and how that's going to change things. And then on top of that, just some basics. I know we've covered many episodes on DV, but really if someone's listening who wants to get a protection order in place, what are the things they need to prove and show in court to get that protection order? And keeping in mind that all the laws are different in each state, unfortunately, which Mum and I now are starting to think it should definitely be a national
response,
not individual states. But yes, and also if you're listening in the USA currently, as far as we're aware, there's no coercive control laws yet, but I believe that's been worked on too by advocacy groups as well.
Yep, and the UK, in UK they criminalised coercive controlling behaviours in 2015.
Woo, go UK.
We'll be able to have a look at them.
Yes.
It's a bit sad because in Britain they say that there was a lack of understanding by the police, coupled with sort of practical difficulties in proving it. But, you know, Jess Hill, we're her fans, who wrote See What You Made Me Do, she said, she made a good point. She made the point that it isn't that hard to prove coercive control because it's one behaviour that continues after separation through internet, phone stalking, maybe multiple court applications or whatever, so that it's a continuing offence, whereas physical violence, once you've removed yourself from that environment, is historical and can be hard to prove. So, and I see in Queensland, I'm probably hopping all over the place, Laura, but just looking at that UK experience, Queensland, Anastasia Palaszczuk is going to create a $363 million package. Can anyone say election time coming? But she's also going to have a commission of inquiry about how the police handle and respond to domestic violence matters. And I know a lot of our listeners have their own stories of the difficulty in trying to get the police to take you seriously. And that Miss Langdon, she'd been to the police so many times. And then, he burnt her house down and killed her.
That's the thing I've noticed, particularly on TikTok, where people are a little bit freer with their stories. I posted one TikTok on how you described what to do if a police officer won't take your statement.
Yes.
And it was take their badge number, ask to speak to a superior, be insistent and return again if you have to. And so many people from the whole way around the world just had the same experiences over and over again of not being taken seriously. Unfortunately, some of them end up damaged or badly hurt or even dead. And so I think this inquiry into the police is a great idea because I think something needs to change around the entire world, to be fair.
Yes. Well, it's a slow, I mean, I'm older, much older, and I can remember the days where before actually the implementation of the domestic violence laws in Queensland and before it was in the Family Law Act in Australia. And in those days, the police had a standard saying, like, if it's a domestic matter, they don't get involved. And then it graduated to, well, where are the bruises? You know, if there's no DV. And I think even in this last 12 months, I've had someone report to me that it was that he said, well, where are the bruises? If he didn't hit you, it's not DV. So we really
as recently as, oh, my goodness.
So we need to educate everybody.
Yes.
But also this movement, apart from the Commission of Inquiry, where you guys can all make your submissions from Queensland, they are bringing in an idea, which might be revolutionary, of a combined coordinated response between our DV services and the police. Because I think in Queensland, the 1-800 RESPECT does a lot of good work. You know, and you are, it's possible you'll hear so much support from those people, and then when you go to the police, that support's gone, and they don't believe you, and you're on your own. You know, and that service doesn't last. It only goes for what is it, the first 6 months, or is it
3 to 6 months? Yes, there's not enough funding to help people past that crisis stage. So, Mum, the current laws now for coercive control. So we've just established pretty much most places that there aren't any laws at the moment. But you did mention to me that coercive control is mentioned in the domestic violence.
Yeah, it's mentioned in the family court as well, in the family law as well. So a definition of family violence now includes the stuff you'd think, which is assault, sexual assault. Includes, though, stalking, and it also talks about things which, by definition, are coercive control, withholding financial support, preventing them from keeping connections with their family, depriving them of their liberty, and so it includes that coercive type of thing, but it's not very clear. Do you know? It's not very clear. And we all know, I think coercive control more than anything else is a pattern. It's not a single incident. It's a pattern. So that's in the family court legislation. In the state laws, they do talk about it as well, and they use the word coercion. So in Queensland, at least, Section 8 talks about that. And it talks about physical or sexually abusive, that's domestic violence, emotional or psychological abusive, economically abusive, threatening, or is coercive, or any other way controls or dominates. But those are sections that's very hard to establish for a person. If you go into a police station and there's been an incident, you can give a date and a time. If you've got just a pattern, like he didn't give me grocery money, or he's cut me out of the health fund, or he's sitting outside my house every night, they're going to go, well, where's the harm in that? It's the lead up. It's that sort of extended happening. And that's why we insist that they take our statements, because to prove coercive control, you have to prove the pattern. And those police have to write down these things, so they need to be educated.
So if our listeners are listening today, as we've banged on about it a million times, as embarrassing as it might seem, because they might minimise it and say to you, well, that's no big deal. I know someone who they get constant abuse via text message, and that, you know, they're like, they go to the police and the police say, well, it's just a text message, it's no big deal. But when you're getting 70 a week after midnight, it is a big deal. So you have to keep advocating for that. If your partner or your ex-partner, maybe you're not fully divorced yet, is withholding all the money from you and you're living on tin food, you need to go and report it and say, look, this is a part of the coercive control. This is happening to me. And I think if we all have to step back and realise, yes, like I've said to some of the people that I know, it can feel silly saying it, but when you describe it and show the whole pattern and you have all your police reports put together, that's when a judge who is educated in this would be able to say, I can see a pattern.
I can see
it. And that's
technically
the only real way I can think of to prove that, isn't it, really, Mum?
It is. And sometimes I think coercive control, you've got to convince yourself that it is before you can go and convince anyone else. And all these niggly little annoying things like cutting your clothes up or not letting you wear this lipstick or taking the keys to the car, checking your phone. You might not be sure whether that's coercive control because often they'll confuse, when you're still together at least, it can be seen as that he loves you. Or she loves you. So you need to write down the things that happen. And it's only then in the cold, hard light of day, you might put 8 or 9 things where it's he's impacted on your life in a day. And then you think, okay, this is actually starting to be what they call coercive control. Then you can start making your reports to the police.
A good test is, because I know that Hannah Clark's mum has talked about how she wasn't allowed to wear her bikini from the beach to the car. That was a strict rule. And she wasn't allowed to have her own Facebook account. They had to have a joint one. And he did it under the disguise, apparently, of, we're one person, basically. So it's little things like that perhaps she might not have told anyone about. Maybe the mum noticed it. But if you are being told that there's rules placed on you that you don't particularly like, but you have to follow these rules, and you wouldn't want to tell your friends about it at a cafe. Oh, my husband says, or my ex used to say, I can't do this unless I've done this first. It's probably a good indication that it is some sort of control, because you're a little bit embarrassed to tell anyone. Oh, he cuts up my clothes. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you've separated your fierce friends who probably dropped off during your relationship, your fierce sister friends, because he wouldn't have wanted them around, and they didn't like seeing you being, they'll soon tell you if what they saw was him changing your behaviour or you changing your behaviour. And the use of the word rules, no one, I mean, as your grandma used to say, who died and made him boss?
Yes.
You really, there shouldn't be rules. You're not one of the children. And I think stronger women, strong people, give in to the little demands of the person just to keep the peace. Oh, it's no biggie. I can just put a T-shirt on and I'll go to the car. Who cares? It's not worth fighting over.
And I think I've got some friends who've got friends who are going through this kind of situation, and domestic violence just in general, not just coercive control, the whole situation. And they're getting really frustrated and saying to me, I'm telling them it's domestic violence. They know it's domestic violence. They were going to leave and then they've stopped. They're not doing it now. And they're getting frustrated and angry. And it's the same with us, like my Nana saying, who died and made him boss. But I think if it's slowly built up over time, I think no matter how strong a person you are, if you have a large capacity to love, and I've seen it in women and men where they just go, well, I love them, so I'll do it. Oh, I love them. But then the rules get harder and stricter and bigger over time. So 10 years down the track, your rules that you might have given in to keep the peace or because you love them so much have turned into your jail cell. And that's an invisible jail cell that nobody can see. So if your friend is going through it and you're banging your head against a wall going, why won't she leave? Why won't he get out? It's because they're literally trapped in a prison cell they've created with their
unknowingly
abusive ex without realising it. And it's a psychological barrier that they have to step through, and it is incredibly hard to do. And that's why they say it takes 4 or 5 times for someone to leave, because they're trapped in it in their minds as well as in reality.
And look at all the pressures to make that kind of will work on a loving person to make them stay. There's the kids. If you're married or in a committed relationship, it's that idea of breaking those vows or stepping out of that commitment. There's the commercial sort of kerfuffle that happens after, the financial disputes and the how are you going to afford it and where am I going to go? Just disruptions in where you go to bed at night and get up in the morning. And
I've heard of other people where they're not from Australia and they're living
Yeah.
And they're worried that if they do leave, and they've been told if they leave that they can't stay.
Lose their visa.
They're going to lose their visa. So that's another.
There's some help about that in Australia.
What's that, Mum?
Well, I don't know it exactly for every state, but I think if you go to the passport, there's an exemption there. And if you have a domestic violence situation and it's going to result in you being made to leave the country, they will help you. Okay.
Brilliant.
So ring up the Foreign Affairs and ask. So, Laura, yes, you're right. So there's all those pressures, and what will the family say? What will everyone say? And there's having to admit that you've been a bit of a goose in a way because you fell for this sort of coercive control.
I guess you have to just admit it. Yeah,
I've been there. I've been there. I wasn't allowed to go to my church. I used to go to church. I wasn't allowed to go to my church. I had to go to a different church with another woman, or I wasn't allowed to go. Why allowed to rules? I should have been out of there. Should have been out of there.
So if anyone is listening right now, because we want to talk about how this law may change things, and if they have realised, I am in a coercive control relationship, or I'm just in a domestic violence relationship, what kind of, like we've said, reporting it to the police, what other things can they do to prove it in a court of law?
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, once you've accepted it, Stevie, you can leave. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just go. But then there's this taking it very seriously. And it's the corollary of what the police and most people would regard as non-serious behaviour, like annoying little things, like put your T-shirt on while you walk to the car. Actually, those little behaviours lead, as we saw with darling Hannah and her children, to the worst outcomes. So it's kind of a misfit, do you know? And so I have to say, I tell my people in those situations don't go to your mum's, go somewhere if you can possibly afford it. Get out of town, go somewhere else safe. And I don't think the police have the resources to protect someone who's vulnerable in that way. I mean, they may be better educated. There is a suggestion that in Queensland, at least, the prison term, I think, is going to be about 12 years. But there's a long time to get that established and proven. And in the meantime, if you've got someone like that, you're at risk. You know? So I think it's, at the end of the day, the domestic violence order or protection order is still just a piece of paper. And if you've got someone who is not usually law-abiding, then you're relying on the police to operate quickly on the domestic violence order. And that's can be risky, as we've seen. I welcome the retraining of the police. I do welcome that. But I think this is going to be a slow improvement, and it'll probably manifest itself in my grandchildren and their children, because in my mother's day, your grandma's day, it was a domestic matter and the police wouldn't get involved. And it was inherently kind of accepted that a man could beat his wife.
Geesh kebabs.
We're a long way from there now. No matter how much in love with someone, if they raise a hand to you, then that is not okay. What we don't realise is that is not the only way they can hurt you. And this controlling what you eat, what you wear, where you go, who your friends are, when you see your family, how much money you can have, how much petrol's in the car, are they going to let you do anything?
That's the one thing that we have a lot of people reaching out asking about, and that's financial abuse, so coercive control through financial. So a lady the other day wrote in and said that her ex has taken all the money and he's got a lawyer and she's got no money and she doesn't know what to do, but he's trying to say, well, you can come back. So I think you've talked about in the past, Mum, there's the $1
yes,
situation.
There's a lot of ways. I was like champing at the bit to help that lady when you told me that, because the court acts quite quickly. If there's money anywhere, You bring an application, just get yourself before a judge and ask for some money to get a lawyer and fund your case. Some lawyers will bring that application for you in the first instance and wait for their money. And then you get what's called an interim property settlement, and it creates a level playing field for everyone. And that means you can have a lawyer as well. And again, this person's trying to get her to come, her ex is trying to get her to come home against her will. And coercion, one of the ways of describing it is making someone do something they don't want to do.
Yes.
That's a family law. It's the coerce. A person means compel or force someone to do or refrain from doing something. And she doesn't. It could be better, I think.
Yes, it's very general. So if there are people out there that are holding back, their ex has taken all the money, they're incredibly wealthy, or even they're not incredibly wealthy, but their ex has taken all the money, and they're too scared to go and see a lawyer because they can't afford it. They could say to the lawyer, there's plenty of money in my relationship.
I just need to get some. Yep.
And that's something that I think doesn't get across, and I want it to get across desperately. And I want to do an episode on things I wish everyone knew. Yes. But the main thing is, because it's a question that's asked so many times, my husband has all the money. He's really wealthy. I've got nothing. If I leave, I've got nothing. And that's not the case. So the money gets shared. You are not going to be left penniless, but you have to put your hand up and get some help and say, hey, help me out, please.
And you have to call BS on their kind of attitude that it's their money and they can give it to you or not give it to you. It's joint money, you know. Your lawyer, if you go and see a lawyer, they'll give you a rough idea what you're entitled to. They'll make the application. Yeah.
So, and you can say to the lawyer that I know how much money's there. Like, we live this lifestyle, we have this house, so you know we can afford this. And the lawyer should, like Mum said, be able to make an application for you, or you could even do it yourself to get in front of the judge and ask for it to be shared so that you can get some legal representation. And I think that stops that financial abuse.
It does. And also, don't forget, if you haven't got money for lawyers, you may not even have money to move out of your mum's place or wherever you happen to be. So you can ask for extra money for all of that. I don't want anyone, though, to fall into the trap that a coercive, controlling person always wants to do. Don't worry. I agree. I will pay your phone bill. I will pay your health insurance. I will pay this. No, you don't want them paying your bills. You want your money so you can live your life. And remember, the stats show it's in the early stages of separation that people are most at risk. So take some of that money and go and find somewhere else to stay, you know.
Yeah.
I know it's hard, you know, that with Hannah, he knew she'd be taking the kids to school. He knew her movements. I think the world has to realise how dangerous those early stages are and make the safety of the women and the children a priority rather than sticking to routine.
And look, and I don't want to scaremonger to anyone who is listening, but, you know, at the moment, like Mum said, the police are not fully resourced for this. So if you have a sense that you are in danger, that it is a heightened time, then call the police, let them know that you're worried. Call, 1-800-RESPECT. Call Brisbane Domestic Violence Services. Make an action plan, make a safety plan, and don't be predictable. Just go and don't be predictable. Yeah. Because if you've made a mistake and everything's fine, it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
But if you don't do a little bit of precaution in this high controlling situation, then it could be a regret that you make. And we're not saying everyone run away and pack bags, but, that you can think outside the box. Maybe go stay with someone that you don't usually stay with, just think outside the box. And like Mum said, the danger time is only really mainly just after leaving.
Yes, while they get to grips with it all, I think the other side gets to I think that one of the things that happens in a coercive controlling relationship, and coercion does include gaslighting, the task force found that, and you will probably have been told that you're overreacting, that you imagined it. They'll do something and you go, hang on, and they go, oh, you're just overreacting. I was only joking. I didn't mean that. And so you're programmed to doubt the evidence of your own eyes and the evidence of your own heart and to doubt your own feelings. So if you're absolutely terrified, don't let anybody tell you that you're overreacting. Follow your gut. You know this person. You lived with them.
Well, that's the thing as well. If you have been in a coercive relationship for a long time, there probably nobody else is really going to know what has been going on, or to the extent that you and maybe after many years of therapy you'll be able to share that with people, but not in the original beginning stages. You might not even know the extent, until you have had a reality check and gone out into the real world and perhaps gone, oh, this is what it's supposed to be like.
But also, if you're in a relationship where there's all these pressures and things, there's two reasons people don't tell anyone else. One is that they know, that if you tell, that fierce friend or whoever it is that's really strong around you, they're going to pressure you to leave, and you don't want to leave because of all the reasons that I said before, So that's one reason. And another reason is that you're humiliated and embarrassed, and you don't want to say anything to anyone. So when you do ultimately leave, a person who exercises coercive control will run to your parents, run to your friends, and try to enroll them and enlist them in the coercive control to make you come back to them. And then when you tell your parents or your friends about it, they go, well, you didn't say anything about it during the time. You sure you're not overreacting? And your friends have an investment in the whole thing, you two staying a couple. Maybe you go camping together. Maybe your parents paid a lot for the wedding and there's pressure. So everyone wants, they're happily married. Remember that? That's a phrase. Oh, she's happily married. And then that's, their raising of you is done. They put you in that little pigeonhole.
Tick.
And she's happily married. Tick. I'm a successful parent. Tick. And I've had people brag, oh, there's no divorce in my family. And I often think, well, what hell are some people maybe going through?
Sorry to interrupt this episode, but we have a really important announcement that very well might just help you out.
Are you feeling confused, lost, scared, and overwhelmed by the family law legal jargon and processes? Join the club. Now it's your chance to empower, educate, and equip yourself with the legal know-how and tools you need to get divorced and finally settle. Introducing the DIY Divorce Blueprint, created lovingly by Mum and me. We've downloaded Mum's brains into 42 video lessons along with over 100 templates and worksheets that you can use to create and settle your property and children's matters. Follow our guide and steps and templates to get yourself finally settled in divorce. Use it as a guide with your lawyer or without, but hopefully using this DIY Divorce Blueprint you can stay out of court and you can get it settled and sorted at a fraction of the price. Click the link in the show notes to find out more, or go to thedivorcecourse.com.au/enroll. See you then.
And I've had people brag, oh, there's no divorce in my family. And I often think, well, what hell are some people maybe going through?
Yes. Yeah. And maybe they don't want to tell their family or their friends because if they decide to stay with that person, then they've got to live with the awkwardness of knowing that their mother or their father or their best friends won't want a bar of the partner anymore. Or
You're right.
If you do make up, because they'll be like, why are you going back to that person? That makes no sense. So I think a lot of victims just don't say anything because they know if they do, they know what the answer is and they know what their friends and family are going to say.
And they don't want to hear it.
Yes.
And I have been privy to some counselling sessions where two people in the room left when like it's group therapy, and when the therapist said, you know what the problem is, you just don't want to face it, and if you don't want to face it, I can't help you, and they just left. But I think that's part of that long goodbye we talk about, Laura, where it takes a while. I did a little YouTube a while back about supporting women who stay, because you don't want to abandon them. Even if they're not very nice to you, they're not returning calls, or they can't talk to you when the husband's home, whatever. You still need to be there as a gentle sort of safety net when they're ready to jump.
Yes. And I have heard some really strong ladies at the moment helping some women by setting up another bank account in a different name, getting some things ready. You know, we have a checklist that you can download and use for your friends or for yourself to start gathering your data ready and keeping it another person's house. You don't have to be ready to leave, but you can start setting up that safety net of having that extra cash in a bank account in case you need to get out urgently, and like just being ready, having a photocopy of your passports and the information about bank account details, because ultimately once you leave, yes, you are going to end up having to go through property settlement and children's settlement and all of that. Now that, Mum, brings me to the next part of that. What is the family court's view on coercive control and children's orders?
It's complicated. The children's primary objective of children's orders is that the children love and be cared for by both parents, and that the children be protected from physical and psychological harm. And we all know coercive control causes psychological harm, and being involved in family violence or having family violence in the home is psychological harm. So there's a tension between those two rights that the children have, to be safe but to see both parents. The law was amended in 2012 to add a little third sort of rider on that, and that says that if those 2 points are evenly balanced, that the child really wants to keep seeing mum or dad or whatever, but doing so gives them causes psychological harm, then the court must always prefer the option that protects the child from harm, right? And so I would think when coercive control is properly recognised, the courts won't be forcing children to go and see the father, usually the father, in those very early worrying stages of a separation, but protect the child, and protect the child by protecting the mother as well. And I'm sorry this is so gender biased, and I know there are men out there who've been through trouble, the same domestic violence, so this applies to you as well. But I think the court doesn't put enough emphasis on the psychological harm caused by coercive control, and it's not their fault. The judges are training about domestic violence, family violence, and I dare say more about coercive control. But they rely heavily on social workers because they only see your statements, your affidavits in the court that were probably written by a lawyer, and there's no evidence, especially in those early stages, over who's doing what, and they're not psychologists. So they send you off to a family report writer or a psychologist, social worker, and get some guidance. And only in the last, say, 12 months, I have seen family reports come in where they are naming the coercive control. And it is in a very subtle thing. And because sometimes the reaction to coercive control, because it's subtle, can seem like an overreaction to the general public. And I'm just thinking about Amber Heard and that...
Johnny Depp,
do you know? The public, I can't watch it, to be honest. But her reactions, to the little bit I know, her actions can be seen as DV. His actions can be seen as domestic violence too. And each of them can be, in a way, be said to be reacting to threats, I suppose, but I haven't watched it all. But, I mean, you can see how tricky it is because a lot of the world is watching every step of that trial. How on earth do you know where the truth lies? Mind you, our darling clients and our listeners wouldn't be hitting or doing any of the other things that perhaps they could be accused of. But it's really hard. So the court has to pay a lot more attention, I think, to the psychological issues. Yeah. And there's an elephant in the room, and that is that financially, the more you have a child, the more child support you get or pay, right? Yes. And there is, I reckon I've seen a correlation between child support and since Child Support Act came in 1989, the idea of equal time with the parents and a presumption of equal shared parental responsibility, that came in 2006. And the combination of those two things have made, I think, for many, many more applications seeking 50-50, exactly half, where a lot of people are surprised that this person's even knows about the children or, that they've been awful to the children. But I think it's driven sometimes by money and a desire to control and stay in your life, stay in a person's life. So I think the court or the law's got some work to do in unpicking how coercive control plays out in co-parenting, really.
Yes, yeah. I think you're right, Ma. I think there's a lot. We all know there's a lot of changes that need to happen, and hopefully this is the first step. For Queensland, at least, with the coercive control laws.
I did a little happy dance, yes, because, and particularly into the inquiry, our police do a wonderful job. But this is an area where the senior people in the force may be the older people who may be trained under that old system I talked about, and it's harder for them.
Yeah, and look, if people have been in coercive control and taken them years to realise, wait, this is coercive control, I don't actually want to be doing this, I'm being forced to, but somehow I think it's, okay.
Peace at any price. Peace at any price.
Perhaps police, they need to have some education in that, because a psychologist or a psychiatrist have got 4-year degrees, 10-year degrees. So, the police, as lovely as they are most of the time, yes, I believe that there does need to still be some changes and some education and maybe some more support for them, more staff, more money.
Well, I'm worried because in Queensland they're talking about working out the collaborative response, but then they're saying there'll be police and specialist domestic and family violence workers working together in a number of locations.
Yeah. Okay.
So
well,
it's not
everybody's job who's listening, if you are in a situation yourself, take it to heart that perhaps maybe, the ride's going to be smoother for you. There's more support in the domestic violence court suggested. There's going to be some sweeping changes, so I think that's a positive. And Mum, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that.
That's okay.
We actually have had some people sending in some reviews, and we are going to choose one of those people today as a thank you, and they get to have a quick a 30-minute chat with Mum. Even if you've got a lawyer, it's a second opinion, and you can ask Mum any questions.
Strings. Yeah.
No string. Okay, so to the person who wrote us a review, they've said, thank you for being a calm and reassuring voice as I've negotiated my divorce. Your content is amazing. So there you go, Mum.
Oh, that makes me feel
good. And that is from SA Divorce. And that was on the 25th of the 4th, 2022. So if you are the person who wrote SA Divorce, send us an email to the divorcecourspodcast@gmail.com, and we'll be able to arrange that free chat with Mum. And if you'd like to leave a review yourself, please feel free for the Apple reviews, and we will be choosing a new person to have a chat with Mum next month. And thank you, Mum, so much for your chat. And thank you, everyone, for listening today. And hopefully we'll see some positive changes moving forward. And if you would like to listen, we've got plenty of episodes on DV and how to with DV, so check them out. I'll put them in the show notes. Yes, Ma?
I was just going to say, one of the interesting things to come out of this, and this is Hannah Clark's dad said, all the pieces for the puzzle are together now, but now we have to focus on raising children who understand that it's not okay to bully or control other people. And have them recognise it if it's being done to them and see it in themselves. So
true.
We've all got jobs to do, any of us with children, grandchildren. Let's do that for the next generation.
Wonderful. All right, thank you, everyone, for listening. Bye.
Bye.
If you found this podcast helpful, we'd love it if you could rate, review and subscribe. By doing so, you are spreading the word to help someone else just like you. Lynn would like to remind you that this podcast is general advice only, and you should always get legal advice in relation to your particular situation. And remember that the Australian laws may have changed since recording.